where's Trump? What happened to Trump? What happened to make America great again? What happened to screw that, drain the swamp? What happened to that? Where is he?
Welcome to another episode of the Olive Roots podcast. I'm your host, Chosi Ayub. Today we have someone special. She's a YouTuber, she's also an author, and she's a U.S. Army vet. Her name is Nadia Asensio. Nadia,
Hi, Chelsea, what's up?
how's it going?
Good, it's freezing. I'm in New York
It's-
City, it's cold.
oh, you're in New York.
Yes, Manhattan.
Okay, I'm in Georgia and it's cold here. As you can tell, I'm like freezing in here. So,
Yeah, come up here and see how much colder it is. It was 13 the other day.
I can't do it. I will
Yeah,
die.
13 degrees. I got outside, the building's warm and the second that door opened, the wind, just the wind, I was like, do I really need to go outside? Like you start like, is this really that necessary? But yeah, we push through it. We get through
Yeah.
it
I don't know how you guys do it, but may God be with you on that one.
for sure.
Yeah, well, Nadia, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So, Nadia, the first portion of this podcast will be you discussing your identity. So, what I would like you to do is share where you were raised, how were you raised, what's your ethnic background, your journey, what did you do for work, being in the military, and all the way to being in Manhattan and doing what you do today. So, the floor is yours.
Oh gosh. All right, where should I start? So, my parents are from Cuba. I was born here by the skin of my teeth. So during the time in Cuba that my great grandfather came here first, right? So he had studied here in the United States. Back then, Cuba and the US were like you could fly back and forth. It was not a big deal. My great grandfather had studied here, so he already had connections here. And as soon as he saw where it was going, he was like, no, no, he already saw it. So he started coming back to New York, setting up his businesses here, and he brought the family, all of us, one by one. By the time he brought my grandmother and my mom had actually, my grandmother had applied for her visa when my mom was like 16 years old, but her visa didn't come up until she was 21 and married. And my father's visa hadn't come. So visas were like, this was like the end of the visas. And so my mom was like, no, I'm not going. And my grandmother was like, well, we can stay. And my father was like, absolutely not staying. You guys are definitely leaving. And so there was like a series of like health, they had to get their vaccinations and this and the other. And that's when my mother found out she was pregnant with me. And so imagine, right? Newlywed, pregnant, new country. At this time, if you left Cuba, you left for good. That was the understanding for all Cuban immigrants. Like you were leaving, you were never coming back, you were never going to see these people again. And so my father, once he found out my mother was pregnant, he was like, there's like no way you're staying here. Takes her to Havana, my grandmother and my mom, puts them on a plane, goes back to his cousin's house in Havana, gets a phone call that evening from the authorities saying, Mr. Asensio, your wife got off the plane. If she's not on that plane tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., she loses her visa. Imagine that. So now he goes back to the airport, get my mom, the screaming, the crying, the whole thing. And then he goes, forces them on the plane, stays until the plane takes off. He sees the plane leave. He's like, all right, that's it. And so my mom and my grandmother came to the United States. And at that time, everyone went through Miami, right? Because they had to get registered and whatnot. Freedom Tower, which is still up. It's a museum in downtown Miami. And so my great grandfather was here in New York and he brought them from Miami to here. And so imagine the culture shock. First, the language. Second, like the trauma of like leaving everyone that like my mom left her dad and her everything that she knew. And the whole city, the city compared to Cuba. I mean, the city back then was it was gray. Everything was gray, and the city was going through all this crime, a huge crime wave. And so it was like this huge culture shock. But this is where she came first. And then she eventually settled in Connecticut because of there were many white collar jobs in Connecticut. At the time, Connecticut was the insurance capital of the world. And so a lot of Cubans immigrated to Connecticut. Factory jobs, but mostly it was the opportunity to work in an office setting, in a corporate setting, straight from the boat, as it were. And so a ton of Cubans settled in Connecticut, which is probably weird, like now when we think about it, because Connecticut is such a different place today, and so I was born in Connecticut, but again, by the skin of my teeth. So was raised very patriotic. My mom had suffered a lot. My family had suffered a lot. And so as first generation American from Cuban immigrants, and this goes across the board, you speak to any Cuban Americans, first gen, and they will tell you like, politics is just part of your growing up. It's what you do. It's what you talk about. It's what you hear the adults talk about. It's everything. It colors everything in your life. So I never knew politics was a thing separate than normal conversation, what everybody talked about, until I got to like high school. You could take political science. And I was like, what is that? Because to me, it was something that I had grown up with. Very much, warned about the dangers of not paying attention. This is the greatest country. This country gave us everything that our country took away from us. That's your president. That's your flag. If you disagree, stand up and run for something. That was my mom's answer to everything. If you don't like how they're doing it, run. If you have a better idea, run. Run for an office, run for a local board, run for whatever you want. You can do that here. Whereas in Cuba, clearly, that was not a choice. And so my mom brought us up with this very much like American understanding and appreciating the United States from an immigrant's point of view, who had suffered, who had lost their freedom and everything else that their family had, the businesses, the houses. I mean, at that time, Fidel would come in and say, like, if you had a home, well, first of all, if you had 3 homes, that was out, right? You could keep 1. But if your home had like 4 bedrooms and you had 3 kids and it's you and your wife, Fidel would say, well, the 3 kids can go in 1 room and you and your wife can go in the other room. So the other rooms that you have are going to be given to another family. I mean, it's just bizarre to think. And I hear people today talk about Cuba, a lot of like far leftists talk about Cuba, like, oh, but in Cuba they have free healthcare. I'm like, in Cuba they don't have aspirin. In Cuba they don't have rubbing alcohol. What do you mean? What kind of, like, the lack of understanding and I get that, and we'll get into this because this is I think where it all stems from, but the lack of understanding, the lack of like just real world applications. Like, yes, it's free, but there's nothing there. Yes, everyone's the same, but they're all poor. So I was raised in a house where, I was taught from a very young age, be vigilant. Your freedom is precious and it's not a given. It can be taken away. Things can change. And as I grew and I studied and I saw world history and everything else, like it just really hit home, So I went through my very rebellious teenage years, eventually got to Miami, was there for a while, came to New York 6 days before 9/11. So I came here with a job, which obviously I didn't even start a day in my job because I came here to, 6 days before so I could unpack and, be settled in before I start. And then 9/11 happened. I was going to be working at the New York Post. They called me immediately and they were like, we're sorry. And I was like, oh, I get it. Like, who's going to care about advertising, at a time like this? And so I lived through that time, which like it's very surreal. It's hard to think it was so long ago, and there are people alive right now that are men and women, young men and women that had no idea, what that felt like. And the job that I did eventually get was in a restaurant hostessing, and it was down by the towers. So I had to walk by the ruins every day I went to work. And it was a scaffolding, and I'll never forget because there's so many New Yorkers, and this is how we are, right? Like, we're fine, we'll get through this. That's our whole motto. We're fine, this isn't a big deal, we'll get through this. We'll get through this, just keep walking. And so we're walking through the scaffolding, which I had to go through to get to work. And on my right was the ruins, and they were covered like with plywood, but you could smell it. There's no way you can't smell, and it's billowing smoke. It's like active. And one day I just looked in there, and it was, I don't know, it was like something that really brought a lot of realities home all at once. You see something on TV, but when you see it in real life and you actually, like, it does something to you. And so I decided to join the military. And I went in, and I worked as a intelligence analyst, military intelligence analyst, which was a super interesting job. The way that the military splits up for security purposes, right? Intel is split up. So there's a whole department for, say, interrogations. There's a different department that does pings. Like, I know where this person was, or I know where this number is located, but I don't know who the person is, and I don't know what they're doing there, right? And then there's a separate department that will hear conversations but not know where they're taking place. You see, so everything's separate. My job was like getting all that information and putting those puzzle pieces together, along with like a stream of, information that came in all the time. And the commander would come in the morning for 5 minutes, literally, and say, what am I doing today? And so we had to report. And why does this matter was always the question. Why does this matter? And so if you couldn't answer that question, you didn't know what you were doing. That was the question. There wasn't any time. And you're always trying to do like the most good with the least, downside, with the least casualties. That was always the goal. And so that taught me to like really focus in on what matters. Why does this matter? Why would this matter and why does it matter to me? Why does it matter for the mission? Why does it matter, going forward? And I brought that into everything that I did moving forward after that. So once I got out of training and all that, I was stationed at Southcom, which is Southern Command in Miami, Florida. We have different command centers all over the world, and they deal with intelligence. And so mine was South and Central America, which is located in Miami. And so I worked also in politics at the time, and for many years. And one of the last positions that I held was for a nonpartisan organization that did a lot of data acquisition, basically just asking people, going door to door with an iPad, asking people, the same 7 questions. How do you feel about your taxes? How do you feel about the school system, the sanitation, blah, blah, the police, all this? And then the last question was, do you identify as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent? And we went to like white collar neighborhoods, blue collar neighborhoods, and it was always the same thing. People were answering the first 7 questions 75, 85% of the time the same way. Last question was, oh, well, I'm an independent, but I register Republican or Democrat so that I can actually vote in the primaries, because that's another thing about our system, which is just completely bonkers. But like, you have no vote unless you pick a side, and there are no sides. So it's all, you know what I mean? It's like this massive gaslighting that's going on. And so then they'd say to us, oh, are you going next door? And we'd say, yes, we're canvassing the whole neighborhood. Oh, be careful, because that one's a flaming liberal or right-wing Nazi, and then we weren't allowed to talk about politics with anyone. But I would say to my partner, like, if they just were able to talk to each other and realize that they agree even on one, even if it were just one topic, they could work together in their neighborhood and fix that one thing. And one is better than none. But the fact that they are like not talking to each other because of something that doesn't even exist, it just made me nuts. And he was like, yeah, but that's how the world is. And so I wrote a book about it. Because I was just like, this is not a game anybody can afford. And it's called Politicate. And so that was back in 2015. And I wrote this book to help Americans, realize that this is a game, this is theater, this is not sport. I know Americans love their sports. I get that. But this is not a game that we can afford to play. We can't play this game. And so how to get over that, how to have discourse, how to find the patch of common ground from where to build on so that we can make real changes, especially on the local level. And so that was back in 2015. 5 years later, we had COVID. I reissued, with a different forward. I didn't change the inside. And I was like, do you guys get it now? Are we getting it? Is everybody getting it? And then had my first YouTube channel, which was New York Nadia, because I was just like, at that point I had gone through school, I had my degree in economics and international relations with a minor in psychology. So I get on, just you guys, like everybody needs to calm down. What I knew about the military and the way the operations worked, right? I knew it was PSYOPs from the start because all the markers were there. But in PSYOPs, in my experience, usually it would last either a day to say like 3 weeks, a month, So I get on YouTube and I'm like, you guys, everybody relax. Like this is going to blow over. We have to think about the economy. If you are sick, if you are older or morbidly obese, absolutely stay home. Everybody else, get to work. Get outside, live your normal life. We can't afford to do this. And like 2 weeks after that, I saw a line wrapped around the block for a supermarket, and it was and with masks. And these are New Yorkers. And this is not in some liberal, I was living in Washington Heights at the time, which is a practically Dominican neighborhood. So these are real New Yorkers that have been here for decades and don't take any crap, right? So when I saw that, I was like, what in the actual F? Because when that whole thing had started, I was convinced. I said, this will never fly in New York. This will never fly here. It might fly in the Midwest. That's how it goes to show you, right? How I was thinking. It was like so the opposite. I said, maybe the Bible Belt will fall for this. New Yorkers will never fall for this. And New Yorkers were the first ones to fall and the hardest. And so I saw all that. And my sister lives in Atlanta. And my sister was like, F that, put your stuff in storage, just come over here. Everything's free and we're normal and everything. And so I did. And I thought that maybe, people from Hotlanta, which is what you guys call yourselves, would be like, oh, she's from New York, she's bringing it over here. But no, everybody was super nice. Everybody was like, welcome to the A and welcome, honey. And, you're going to learn our ways. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this place. And I almost stayed, but came back to New York and it was like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Literally. Everyone was wearing masks, alone in their cars, outside in the fresh air, walking around. I hadn't worn a mask in 4 months. I told my mom, I said, I'm not wearing a mask. So if I go to prison, I want you to know right now, this is where I'm going. She was like, Nadia, please. She's always like she raised me this way, but then she worries about me acting this way, right? And so she's like, Nadia, please, just do whatever they say. I said, no, Mom, I'm not going to. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to wear a mask, and they can do whatever they want. But I didn't wear a mask on the plane. I didn't wear a mask in the airport. I didn't wear a mask anywhere. Um, and nothing happened, you know? I had a lot of space on the subway. Nobody wanted to sit next to me, which was great. I was like, I found the secret. But that only lasted a couple of months once people started to get like overwrought with all the BS and, you know, the more conversations were taking place online. I think a lot of more people got really hip to understanding, especially who Fauci was. A lot of people didn't know about Fauci, like his history, especially here in New York City, what he had done during the AIDS pandemic, how many people died because he refused to approve life-saving medicines because he wanted to come up with a vaccine. And this is all documented. I'm not making any of this stuff up. I wish I were. And like once people started becoming aware of that, then they were like, you know what, screw this. At the time, I met a woman named Jo Rose. Jo Rose was a teacher here in New York City who was told if you don't get vaccinated, you lose your job. And she's Dominican. And she was like, then guess what? I lose my job. My parents didn't come here for this. And she by herself got on corners with a bullhorn and just said, this is unconstitutional. They can't do this to us. That's when I met her. By the time, you know, like a year, not even a year later, we had a protest of thousands and thousands of people in New York City, down Fifth Avenue and up 8th. And it was, you know, the police were there to escort us to make sure everything was great. And thousands of people came out to support us. The media was silent. There were no accounts of this anywhere. And which was mind-boggling to me on the one hand, but we were getting covered by like Russia, you know, all sorts of Asian, and Australia came and, you know, they were all interviewing us. And I was like, where is Fox News? Where is CNN? They're literally down the street. Why aren't they covering this? So I was, again, on my YouTube channel just saying, hey, this is New York. What you guys are being told isn't what's actually happening here. People are rebelling and revolting. And that's always been, I guess, like a very, because of the way that I was raised, right? Very important for me to be vigilant, to speak out. You know, I love my country and I love my countrymen. And that's my focus. And anything that threatens that, I take personally. And so I carried that on. I had to actually shut down my first channel because at the time, the things that I was saying were very controversial to YouTube, right? And so YouTube started to demonetize me, slow down. I mean, I got to 90,000 subscribers within like 2 months, and it took me an entire year to get to 100,000. So that goes to show you like how much squashing there was going on, and it was affecting my money. Like I couldn't, you know, make any money from it, and I said, you know, I have to close it and just start fresh, which is what I did with Nadia4Real. So that's where I'm at now.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Um, you know, you spoke about, you know, grandparents in Cuba, getting out of Cuba to go to America for a better life. You spoke about moving to New York before September 11th, 5 days before September 11th. Then you talked about COVID and all the crazy mandates. It's interesting because those three things have one thing in common. I don't know if you know this or not. There's a specific kind of group of people that are behind what happened to Cuba. The same group is behind September 11th, and the same group is behind COVID and the vaccines. They're the same ones who are committing a genocide in Gaza today. Most people can't relate that to Cuba, but if you dig down the rabbit hole, you will always find the rabbit with the missing letter T at the end.
I think that I agree. It doesn't, I mean, I think that the way that the human mind works, right? We compartmentalize things in order to make sense of the world. And so sometimes it's difficult for people to make those connections because it's in a different file. You know, like, oh, that's in this file. That's not part of this file. But the common denominators, and it doesn't take a lot of research, but the common denominators, I think, are there. When we talk about communism and where it came from and how it started, and how it was pushed and why and everything behind that. I know enough about Fidel Castro, and I've studied him like at length, to tell you that a man like Fidel Castro was not a communist when he started. He just wanted the power. He just wanted the power, and that was it. A lot of complicated situations with him and his father. He was a bastard child. So although he had money and his father had money and he went to good schools and everything else, there was always that psychological contention of, this represents my father. And subconsciously or consciously, who knows, he was not himself a communist. Communism just happened to be the most expedient way to get there. His brother was a communist. And so his brother was like, listen, this movement's really taking off. And Fidel was like, if that's whatever, if that's what it is, then I'll go that way. His whole aim was just to gain the power that he did. And I think it was literally a rebellion against his father and the way that he had been raised, and how he identified himself as like not enough or not good enough or not to the standard. There's so much psychology behind decisions that people make. And we like to think that, well, world leaders have good advisors and everyone's acting logically. Human beings are not logical across the board. We're 90% of our decision making is based on emotion. We only use logic to validate our choices to others, right? To present them to others. We use logic, but don't you see, this is what makes sense. But really, in reality, we do things because of how we feel and how it makes us feel, doing the action or not. And that's true for communism as well. Everyone's the same. Why? Where does that come from?
Yeah. Also speaking about September 11, I came to the US 3 weeks before September 11. And I came to Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia. And people, when they met me before that, they're like, "Where are you from?" I was like, "I'm Palestinian." Had to explain what that means. They call us Middle Easterns, and I had to understand what that means. And they call us Arabs, and I had to understand what that means. And I'm like, "Bro, I'm just Palestinian. Like, I speak Arabic and I'm Palestinian, and that's my identity." And then I was walking into the dorm one day, September 11th, and I'm seeing all the people sitting watching the TV. And I look at the TV and I see fire and people jumping and planes. And I'm like, oh, this looks like back home, something I'm used to seeing all the time growing up. So I didn't understand what was going on. Then I go to the computer room because we had computers in the internet room in the dorm. It's interesting because all the white people were watching the TV and all the black people were in the internet room, not caring. So I went to my black friend, Michael, and I was like, what's going on, man? And he's like, yeah, they say the trade centers were hit and it was like a terrorist attack. I was like, what is the trade centers? He's like, it's the two buildings in New York. And I was like, who hit them? They're like, they say there's this guy called Bin Laden. And I'm like, who's that? So I'm asking all these questions. And I was like, why are you not there watching it? He's like, well, they don't care about us, about black people. And I'm still new. I'm 3 weeks in the United States.
Right.
So then I walk back to the lobby where the TV is. And then this white girl comes to me. And she's like, hey, Chelsea, how you doing? I'm like, I'm good. She's like, you're from over there, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, do you know Bin Laden? And I was like,
Personally,
yeah. And I was like,
he's
uh,
my uncle.
that's what I said. At first, I was like, wow, the ignorance. So then I was like, yeah, he's my uncle. And she's like, what? I was like, get out of here, girl. So I started digging and I'm like, I immediately knew who was behind this when I saw the dancing Israelis. And then I knew how those people that call themselves Israelis and Jews are celebrating. I saw what Benjamin Malkowski, aka Netanyahu, the Polish man that pretends to be Semite, was saying about the trade centers and wanting to hurt America. And I start digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm like, okay, if you want to tell me you couldn't take down two planes that were going in the wrong direction, what about Building 7? Oh, the Pentagon was hit, but the plane was it a missile? And I didn't, I didn't have to ask anybody. I was just thinking that myself. But apparently, if you're a critical thinker, you're a conspiracy theorist. And every
Right.
conspiracy I ever mentioned became truth. There's like a little time, a couple of months between it's a conspiracy and a fact. And then I was like, okay, they found a Saudi Arabian passport
In that rubble.
in that rubble. Bin Laden is behind it from Afghanistan. Let's go to war with Iraq. And I'm
That
like,
makes
what?
sense.
What?
No, that totally makes sense.
And
Of
then
course.
I saw what's happening in Iraq, and it broke my heart because Iraqi are awesome people, and millions were killed, Muslims and Christians alike. And they want to call Saddam Hussein the enemy. Gaddafi is the enemy. Assad is the enemy. All these people are the enemy. And I'm like, first of all, you're the enemy. You're the one who created all this turmoil. You're the ones who destroyed Cuba. You're the one who destroyed Puerto Rico. You're the ones who are trying to destroy Venezuela again. You're the one who destroyed all these countries in the so-called Middle East, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. You drop bombs on Japan, and you want to tell me about morals and values and democracy. So that was September 11. And then speaking about COVID, when when COVID when coronavirus hit, I was already watching TV overseas, and I'm seeing this thing brewing about a new virus. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, this thing is gonna come to America very soon. Coming soon.
Yep.
Then I start watching TV, and they showed this theater in China, people falling in the street and doing this and like
Right.
theater, right? And I'm like, what the heck? Ain't nobody dying from nothing like that. That we would be all dead, right? So then it hit Italy. Oh, it's moving west. And then they's like, oh, Italy, people are dying. The hospitals are full. Called my
Right.
Italian friends. What's going on? He's like, I'm just chilling at the beach.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Pretty
okay.
much.
Then, boom, New York. Oh my God, this is the first place that it hit, apparently.
Mm.
New York, the hospitals are overwhelmed. It's chaos. I called my friend Diala. She lives in New York. She's a nurse. I was like, hey, where you at? She's like, I'm at work. It's like, what's going on? She's like, nothing, just a regular day. I was like, you guys are not slammed with patients in COVID? She's like, what are you talking about? She put her phone and she showed me that some beds have people on them, like regular. Some beds are empty. It's no chaos, just regular chaotic things that happen in hospitals.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, this does not add up. And then I started going down the rabbit hole. Then I know that there was a patent in 2015 on coronavirus. Then I start going deeper and deeper, and they're like, "Oh, it's a Chinese guy that ate a bat," and I'm like, "What?" And then they start beating Asians in the metro stations, and
Yeah.
they didn't care if they're Chinese or Japanese or Korean or whatever. I was like, "That's racist." It's kind of like September 11 with doing that to anybody who looks like me. So then I start looking into what's the plan here, and I was like, depopulation. You know,
Well, and the greatest transfer of wealth, I
Yeah,
think,
the
in
Great
history.
Reset as well. The Great Reset, moving money, all these chairmen leaving the where they are, going somewhere else, stocks and all that. They're making money by killing people. So they created this virus to kill the old people. Then they created the vaccines to kill the young people.
Yep. Pretty much.
And when you start looking who's behind Moderna, Pfizer, and all that, it's the same group of people that were behind September 11th.
Have you seen that meme that I forgot what it's a shot from a movie, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio looking at his watch and it's like, what time is it? Every effing time. You know what I mean?
Every
It's like
effing time.
I'm not every effing because you research this stuff and it goes to the same place. What am I supposed to do about that? That's not my fault. I mean, don't look at me. I'm researching it. This is what I'm good at. Like analytics, that's how my mind works. I like to get to the bottom of it. I like to connect the dots. And it always goes back to the same thing. So
Yeah.
how is that my fault?
Yeah.
You
It
know,
always.
when Kanye West said like this is all owned and he had that huge list, how is that his fault? How he's stating a fact,
Well,
you know?
facts are anti-Semitic.
Correct.
And they're not even Semites. I'm the Semite.
No,
You
no,
know,
you're not.
they are actually the anti-Semites by killing Palestinians, you know.
Well,
We're the Semites. So then, yeah, COVID happens. I didn't put a vaccine. I didn't put a mask. I didn't take no shots, no vaccine. I'm not going to put no poison in my body that has aborted babies' blood and whatnot.
yeah.
I was
Or
like, this
who
is
knows
all,
what else.
yeah, this is all satanic ritual. Maybe there's GPS chips. Who knows? Maybe it's the mark of the beast. Maybe eventually they're going to detonate it and turn it on and people are going to start falling in the street. I don't know what's going to happen. But it's one less thing for me to worry about dying from the vaccine. So I'm
Right.
like, I'm not gonna do it. And I've always been like this. I've always been a critical thinker, and I was taught to question everything. Right? My mom worries about her shadow. She's scared of everything. You know, but I was like raised to be scared of everything because I was the boy, and she was always worried about me. So I decided to go the other side, where I'm not gonna be scared of anything. I'm gonna question everything. The only person I'm going to fear is God, and that's it.
Amen.
So I start going and reading and this and that, and I figure out it's the same group of people. And now here we are again, dealing with the same group. And now they're not hiding it. They're very proud. They're outspoken. They are in the Congress. They're in the White House. You got people standing up and down for them, like they're the golden calf. You have their flags being flown in the United States.
Yeah.
You have them running the lobby, APAC, and controlling all these politicians that are supposed to represent our nation here. And we're sending all these millions of dollars to that entity and beyond, and neglecting the citizens of America, especially people like you who fought, that are veterans, and some of them are in the streets. So you used your own people for wars that didn't have to even be in, for the gains of another foreign entity. That is treason, and that's the definition of treason.
100%. 100%. And now what's going on with IHRA, what they're trying to push, I don't know. I don't see a world where this won't, I mean, will this will pass or that it won't get pushed back and eventually repealed if it does go through. Because making any criticism of the state of Israel considered hate speech and punishable by law, that goes directly against the First Amendment. I don't see how, and part of me, to be honest with you, feels like this is just a really great distraction. You know, let's get everyone, because it will never fly. It just won't. It goes against the very basic laws of this country. So what would be the purpose of that distraction? If I get everybody looking over here, then they won't see the real thing. And to me, there's a lot of real things going on, but amongst those, and everyone, like, they could say, well, I have fatigue about that, like, just let it go. We're not letting it go because it's so connected to everything else, which is the Epstein files. The Epstein files are the number one, I think, problem for this administration, for any administration. It just so happened to fall in this administration. You know, Trump made a lot of promises. In my opinion, he delivered his first 3 years in office. And then the fourth year, when COVID came around, I was like, nope, that's not how you do it. There's riots on the street. You don't invoke the Insurrection Act. Why not? Why aren't you calling the National Guard? Why aren't you making sure that there's law and order? And of course, like every other, you know, like abused housewife, I made excuses for him, right? I was like, oh, well, it's an election year. Maybe he wants, you know, these Democrat-led cities to suffer the consequences of their policies so that the people will see and then he'll win the election. But that was all BS. I just did that to my, you know, when you try to like make excuses for another person and you start like all this jujitsu, all this mental jujitsu just to make it what you think it should. Well, it's probably because he's so smart and he's letting them. No, it's not. It's because he's controlled, he's compromised, he's being told to step down. and to let it go. And he's doing it, and then the fast tracking of vaccine, that was another one. I was like, what? What is that? First of all, Trump, as a real New Yorker, as a New Yorker that was here for Fauci's reign of terror during the AIDS crisis, he knew good and well who Fauci was. What he should have done day one was remove him from office. Like, thanks for your service. We can't trust you. So I'm going to get somebody else in here. The fact that he fast tracked it. And then on top of that, after all the data started coming out about the vaccines and like how young athletes were dying from this and all the troubles, he still stood up for it. He's like, and I fast tracked it and I saved lives. And I'm like, where's Trump? What happened to Trump? What happened to make America great again? What happened to screw that, drain the swamp? What happened to that? Where is he? And that's when I was like, clearly, I mean, when I wrote Politica, that was one of my first things. Like, a politician will never be your friend. That's not their job, right? And so we need to start being friends with each other, even if we have to grit our teeth through it, because we're in the same boat. They're never going to be your friend. But then when Trump came along, he had such a populist message. He went right into the heartland of America. He knew exactly where to hit or who to hit, with his message. And it worked. And it did. Even to me, I was like, well, maybe here's a guy whose ego is big enough, hopefully, where he's going to think, well, the most important thing is for me to be the greatest president that ever lived. So if that means I have to cut ties with Israel, or if that means I have to really drain the swamp, then I will. And I'll be the greatest president that ever lived, I thought. But apparently his ego wasn't that big. It wasn't that big. It could be appeased by other things. So far as, now when I look at the situation with Trump and how he's basically like acquiesced to this occupation of the United States, it has basically given up his promise, to maybe, one day be the greatest president that we've ever had. In my opinion, it's a very complicated situation, right? You have, for example, the many loans that he was given when he was just a businessman. Those have to get paid back, and not with money, but, with favors. The fact that his daughter is married to a Kushner, and what I try to explain to people is, do you think that was random? Do you think do you think they met and fell in love? What are the odds? What are the chances of that happening? Or do you think that two very powerful men with shared interests said, wouldn't it be great if we consolidated our wealth and our power and ensured that it would go? Because that's how marriage has always been throughout the ages, right? That's what marriage is. Families consolidate their wealth and they grow it through marriage. And so he marries his daughter off to the Kushner family. She goes ahead and converts. There's a lot of different moving parts to this. And then added to all of that is his connection to Epstein and Melania Trump and Melania's connection to Epstein and everything that's coming out about that. What did she know Epstein apparently, or what allegedly, what a lot of alternative media is coming out with is that, she did know him, and that Epstein introduced Melania to Trump, which brings in a whole other set of questions. Did she work for Epstein? Was she one of his girls? Is this part of this cover? Is this part of this giving over our sovereignty just to keep this secret? Why do people do anything for their children? Trump has plenty of kids. And maybe in his head, it's like, well, what kind of legacy would this be? He's in a vice. Any which way you slice it, he's in a vice. And I don't think that he started off that way. I think it became apparent to him as he gained popularity and power, because this is how these people work. They don't threaten you in the beginning. This is what you want. We think you'd be great. We're going to help you. We're going to give you everything. Then when you're up there and you have everything to lose, then they're like, oh, and by the way, I have this on you. So from now on, this is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to say. You know, if they tell you from the beginning, you wouldn't even run, right? You wouldn't even, you'd say like, no, never mind. You know, I have kids. I have to think about them. I'm making great money. I don't need you. No, they give you exactly what you want and they play it up. And then once you're up there, then it's like, oh, and by the way, you know, and I feel that this is what's being played out. And it's heartbreaking to me as an American. You know, my mom still, she's like, don't tell me about Trump, Nadia, please. I need to, like, she wants to still believe because he had that impact on Americans that remembered Ronald Reagan. Say, for example, you know, my mom's opinion, Ronald Reagan was the greatest president ever. No matter how many times I tell her about the Iran-Contra deal, like no matter how many times I try to explain that, she's like, no, you know, they'll write anything now because he's dead. And I'm like, all right, Mom. It's just, again, human beings react. The choices that we make are emotional. And that's what he tapped into. And right now, the emotion in the United States, I think I can it's, you know, fair to say that the emotion is we're sick and tired of sending money to Israel. We don't understand what this is. We don't care what it is that you owe them or who's going to get blackmailed or, you know, this guy said, you know, we have to be careful with the files. It's going to hurt a lot of people. We don't care. We don't care. From a military standpoint, I do see the danger in it. I do, because it can cause a very violent meltdown in many different countries, right? Once a nation understands who's actually running their nation and the hypocrisy and what's really going on, just that on its face, right? The very first, you know, the crust, if you will, the amount of riots, violent riots, I think that would cause, yes, that is very dangerous. But at this point, I don't care. I really don't. It has to get there. It has to get to that point. And I'm not advocating violence. It's just going to happen. Because once people realize the depth of the lie, you know, I think more than anything, people can forgive almost anything except a lie. A lie is like, this is something that pretty much, you know, across the board, all human beings, if you know, even children, if you lie to a child and see the reaction, and they've only been here for whatever, 3 years, 4 years on earth, and they're already like, you lied to me. This is something we have innate, and we have nothing to replace it with. We have no one at this moment to say, okay, once those files come out and everything's known, let's say it's going to hit hard in France. When it hits hard, what do we have in place for that to control that situation, and who can we replace that leader with fast so that, you know, that's non-existent. Nobody has that control. Nobody has that ultimate control to make these decisions. And so everyone's just hoping that this will just blow away and people will eventually, people are not, because this is, I believe that the Epstein files is the point where everything else comes out. You know, everything else comes from this list, comes from these files. Who was involved? What happened? When did it happen? Who knew about it? Who covered it up? Because this is going to expose the web, the World Wide Web, when it comes to child trafficking and, you know, blackmail rings and who's behind it and the rest of it. So I would say, like, even things like IHRA, which I am keeping an eye on, you know, Mike Huckabee meets with Jonathan Pollard, and I'm like, how is this okay? In what world? This is treason, straight up treason. And Jonathan Pollard, and seeing him, he did an interview, I forgot what's Jerusalem Times or Jerusalem Telegraph or something. And he said that, you know, if Israel were not supported by the United States, then, you know, we have to act with our weapons, with, you know, and I was like, really? You know, let me just stop there, because now I'm going to say something I'm going to regret. But I found it interesting that he would say that aloud and that there was no response from anyone in government. Right. Not Marco Rubio, no one. No one said a thing. This is like an outright threat. And no one has said a word.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Trump is playing 5D chess apparently, so according to the Trumpsters. But well, I think Americans are just hitting puberty with Israel because they just are finding out all these things. And as Palestinians, we've known that since 1948, who this entity is. And we were born with stories from our grandparents how that entity is a liar and the father of all lies, which Jesus Christ warned us against them in John 8:36-44. He called them, your father is the devil. He's the father of all lies. And that entity has lied and used and abused the United States of America. And going back to Trump, in 2016, when I saw that Trump was gonna, you know, being a candidate for presidency, I'm like, oh, perfect. Businessman. He's not a politician. He wants to make America great again. So hopefully, poverty will stop. We will not go to wars. He will drain the swamp. He will expose Israel. That's what that means. The swamp, the deep state, to me is
Right.
Israel. It's not Russia. It's not Iran. It's not China. It's none of that. And I'm like, okay. But I was still not an American, so I couldn't vote anyways. I was still getting my green card. And then he wins. And I'm like, okay, cool. We got rid of Satan and we got Trump. So I'm like, okay. And then I immediately knew after the first year in 2017, when he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and he got money by the Adelson family back then,
Right.
I'm like, they bought him. It didn't take much. It didn't take 3 years. It took 1 year. They bought him. He had to go kiss that wall. It's the ritual that they have to do
Yeah.
to claim who's your master. It's either God or their God.
Right.
So he went to worship that wall, kiss their God, get that money, and they covered all the loans he had from the business deals. That's most people don't know about.
Right.
And now he sold his soul. And his daughter converted to Judaism. His ex-wife is Jewish. Most people don't know that.
Who?
And whatever her
Ivanka?
name is. Yeah, the
Oh,
one, yeah.
Ivana.
Ivana. Yeah. So, and then his half of his family is Jewish. And the Kushner family, you already know how wicked they are. So you start seeing at the big picture in 2017, and I'm like, oh, Trump is done. So then we get a potato, Biden, which is also a Zionist. So it doesn't matter left or right, two wings on the same dragon, not a
Yep.
bird. It's a dragon because that's the Satan, that's the devil. And that dragon has a specific kind of looking beak. So then I'm like, okay. And then Trump comes back because people are sick of liberals and Biden and all that. And I'm like, okay, you guys are playing like my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. The right wing bombs the so-called Middle East, create immigration crises. The left opens the border and let these people in and create chaos and division. And it's a plan to ruin the West used by the same group of people.
Right.
You're voting. You want the right wing of Israel or the left wing of Israel? That's what you're voting for. So it's the United Slaves of Israel, and that's what they call us. They call us goyim, slaves. So they believe
Right.
we're all created to serve them. Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, it doesn't matter. You are their slave. And now, eventually, the exposing happens with what's happening in Gaza. Gaza became the moral compass of the world. It showed all these sold out celebrities, all these sold out organizations that care about pets and women rights and children lives and no abortion. They were crickets. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, so only maybe American babies, but not Brazilian or Palestinian or Nigerian or whatever. I'm
Right.
like, okay. Oh, we care about animals, but it doesn't matter that the Israeli soldiers are killing donkeys and sheep and goats in Gaza and the West Bank. Who cares, right? They're God's chosen people. So I'm like, okay, I guess your God is Satan, whatever. And then we start
Or
getting
pretty
this Epstein list,
well,
this Epstein situation, which I knew about. People, your government and these celebrities have slept with babies and children, just so you know.
yep.
So they keep lying. There's a list. There's no list. Oh, it's the liberals list. It's the conservative list. I was like, they're both on the list.
Or it's a
Celebrity.
hoax. There is no list.
Yeah, there's no list. Celebrities that we love and followed, and celebrities, artists, musicians that we listen to are on that list. And but if you're Jewish and you are stuck in pedophilia, you get shipped to Israel.
Yep.
You know. But what if you're not a Jewish in America? Maybe you're gonna go to Greece like Tom Hanks. I'm not sure. Maybe you're gonna do stuff that is considered pedophilia as disability in some
Right.
places.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just very weird. And I'm like, okay, Epstein has a big hand. Israel has a big hand. But even before Epstein, America was still funding Israel.
Oh yeah, no.
So yeah, so that hand, that leech, that vampire has been on America's neck for a long time. And then you start looking at World War One narrative, World War Two, and you're like, did the good guys win? Like who won?
Yep.
What's really behind this whole World War One narrative, World War Two, the Nazis, the Havara agreement between the Jews and Hitler? What's going on with England, the Rothschild, taking Palestine? Okay, before that, the Ottoman Empire, creating a genocide on Armenia, the Young Turks were Jewish. Let's go back to the Bolshevik Revolution.
Mm.
Let's go back to this. Let's go back to the French Revolution. Let's keep going back. And you're like, you start noticing a pattern
Yeah.
that there's a group of people that are dividing the mass. And those group of people don't see us as humans. So I don't know what's that going to lead to, but I think there's two parts of things happening in America. You have the part of economy. We're done with you sending money to Israel because we want the money. Those are people that just care about their money. They don't care that that entity is killing children in Gaza. Then you have the second part of the heresy of theology, Christian theology, that believe that if you send all the Jews back to the promised land, then Jesus will come back. So maybe this is a theory, it might be true, it might be wrong, but my understanding, I think they're getting louder and louder to create more hate towards them because it's not hidden anymore. So eventually they're going to be oppressed and hunted around the world, that they have no choice but to go to occupied Palestine, also known as Israel today. So the Zionist Christians, which are not Christians, the evangelical Christians and
Mm.
whoever follows that heresy, will be like, okay, now we pushed all these so-called Jews, whether they're real Jews or the synagogue of Satan, into that land. Who cares
Mhm.
about the Palestinians? Let them kill the Palestinians. They don't care. Let them create the greater Israel. Let them kill Lebanese, Syrian, Jordanian, Saudi Arabians, Egyptians, Iraqis, Iranians. Who care? Who cares? We're not there. It doesn't matter. So let's just send them all there and Jesus will come back. Let them build the third temple, the Antichrist temple, because Jesus is coming back. And guess what? It doesn't matter because the rapture is coming.
Yeah, and we don't have to worry
Hallelujah.
about it. Yeah.
Jesus is going to take me before the tribulation. And I'm like, oh, you are up for a rude awakening.
Very rude.
Because they're going to worship the Antichrist, these people. They're helping the synagogue of Satan build the third temple, which is blasphemous because
100%.
Jesus Christ is the third temple. And they're funding them and doing all that in the name of Jesus.
I
This
think
is this is what they're
well,
doing.
the leaders definitely are doing it in the name of money, right? So
Yes.
you look at like Jeffress, who's like worth 5 million that we know of, right? Personal wealth. Um, all of these televangelists, like they're multi millionaires. some are even in the billion. So they're definitely for the money. Their followers are doing it for what they believe is a righteous purpose. So when I had Rabbi Weiss on, he's an ultra-Orthodox rabbi here in New York City.
Do not be intimidated. Speak up as much as you could. I know you will be accused of self-hating Jews and that, but try what you can. Urge your politicians that they should do what they can to stop this murder in Gaza, to stop the oppression of the Palestinians, and it will be a gift for the Jewish people also.
And the way that he explained it, and he talked about the Reformed Jews, and he talked about like 350 years ago when they split off, and he didn't go into the details. The details I know, but that wasn't the theme of the talk, right? The interview was more about like trying to educate American Zionists, Christian Zionists, into understanding that what they are supporting, not only is it not biblical, it's not okay. It's not godly in any way. You're not, forced to support Israel and what they're doing, because according to Judaism, Jews are in exile, period, right now. They have no, according to the religion, no right to mass, to go and to create a nation anywhere. And like the rabbi said, even if the land had been completely unoccupied by a living thing, they still did not have, in the religion, the right to do that, because they are in exile. They're in exile for a reason. And the way that the rabbi just broke everything down, and my thought was, hopefully people that need to see this will, and they will understand, because I believe that there's like a lot of guilt. We're talking, the average American, right? Let's say the average American making, I don't know, 50 grand, 60 grand a year with 2 kids and a wife, or, however they break it down. They don't have the time, right? The free time, the expendable time to go and research all of this. And there's also the component of wanting to belong to a group. This is just a human component baked into our DNA, into our neurology, so that we can survive. And so if you are living in a town where everyone's an evangelical, and everyone is an evangelical, and church is a part of your social fabric. It's not just somewhere where you go to praise God. It's also somewhere where you go to bond with other people in your community. It becomes very, very important to just agree and follow and say the same things. And this happens, across the board, whether we're talking about the police department or gangs or the mafia or evangelicals or Christian, whatever. Everybody, we're all susceptible to this, which is fine. It's, if people want to live that way, if people want their mind, controlled by these lunatics, that's absolutely fine. Stay out of my government. This is the point of contention. Stay out of my government. You can believe whatever you want. You can say whatever I do not care. I couldn't care less. Stay out of my government, because that is when I take it personally. And that is what's been going on. And it's such, like you said, he took this money. I didn't know enough about this situation in 2017 for me to have made that connection. Clearly, and I made a video on Christian evangelicals, because it is just so absolutely bonkers. Al Jazeera put out a documentary, which is excellent. It's called Praying for Armageddon, and it's on YouTube. All 2 episodes, full episodes, are on YouTube. And I highly recommend watching this. And just the amount of, so Christians United for Israel, John Hagee goes over to Trump in 2016, starts working on his head and saying, this is biblical, this is prophecy. Israel's 70th anniversary is going to come up. And do you know what this number 70 represents in the Bible? You are the chosen one. You are the one that's going to create the temple. You. And Trump, because like I said, he does have an ego, but it's not a big one. It's a very fragile one. It's not this confident, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do what I want. I know what's right. And don't tell me what to do. It's kind of like, well, do you like me? And whoever gives him the biggest prize or pets him the hardest gets his attention. And at that time, thinking I'm going to be the reason for I am going to go down in history for this. So he goes ahead, he signs it. They make, Jerusalem, they did the thing with Jerusalem. They gave him a coin. They put him on a coin, right? Trump would have never, I mean, I don't think in the US he would have ever gotten that honor of his face being on a coin. Maybe, but probably not. But here he was, and not only his face on a coin, but his face next to Cyrus, King Cyrus. So now he's being associated in his mind. These people are associating me with this literal like Messiah that's going to come back. And I'm not only just on a coin, I am a king. This is how I'm going to be remembered. All of these things, it's like when you try to explain these situations or try to even understand these situations, there's so many factors, you know, being compromised, the blackmail, yes, but then the kids, and then also like the psychological part of it. It's just a lot. It's a lot to make sense of. But at the end of the day, like we've already established, it all goes back to the same people. It all goes back to the same people. And Candace Owens has talked about this. The Frankists, I don't know if you're, yeah. So she's talked about all this. She's, you know, this sect of Judaism, which came up, I forgot now exactly the date, but basically the belief that, you know, the more evil you do, the faster, the more power you will get, the quicker you will get accepted into society and blah, blah, blah. I don't understand, or I don't know how many times the same thing has to happen historically before people go like, yeah, that's not working, right? I see this going down a road. Back in 2012, I told my mom 2 things will happen in my lifetime, and they're both coming true. And at the time, my mom was like, oh, Nadia, don't even say, I'm like, Mom, it's obvious. Look at these signs. And I see them both happening. And my mom's like, oh my God, you know, you were right. I'm like, yeah, because this always happens. We've gone through this already. Everything that we're going through right now, we've already gone through. I just have to pick up a history book, you'll see. Same exact situations over and over and over again, right? How many times do you have to make the same mistake before you stop, before you realize that what you're doing is not working, before you understand that there is no magic anything where doing evil will bring you good? You can't, you know, plant an apple seed and get a puppy. That's not how it works. Even if you plant 1,000,000 apple seeds, it will still not produce that puppy. Like, you have to come to an understanding. But again, this is all psychological, all of this like trauma, and like, you know, we will not be, and I get that. Listen, I get that. You don't want to live that way. You don't want to live in fear. I understand. Maybe you should change your ways. Maybe you need to take a beat, you know, change your ways. Maybe you should consider that if you have been given land and you're not religious, right, but you are ethnic, and just stay in your lane. How about that one? Just stay in your lane. Don't, you know, be happy, do trade, right? Make money, everything's fine. What is the problem here? If you want to develop something in Palestine, sure, pay for it. You don't have to, there's no bullets required. Everybody loves money. Pay for it. They'll even work on it. They'll make it happen faster. You'll probably get even better results because they know the land. Why wouldn't you just do that? You know, understanding that there will be backlash and there is no magic source that will prevent you from that. That is why Christ, I mean, for many reasons, I follow Christ. My deepest admiration, even as a man, even as a person, you know, when I think about Christ, like, here's a young man, had followers, right? Obviously could have had anything he wanted, and he chose to die for what he had taught so that we would hear it today. You know, if it's like Socrates, right? Socrates was like given the choice, you know, either you go against everything that you taught us or you take this poison. He said, I'll take the poison. There's no way I'm going to undo everything that, and that's why we still know who Socrates is. And the same goes for Christ, just on the human level. But as Christ said, like, I am the truth, the light, and the way. The truth is the truth. This is the truth. There is no magic, potion, incantation, sacrifice, anything that's going to change the basic universal law that you will reap what you sow.
Amen. Amen. I mean, the king is coming back, and based on how things are looking, it might be sooner than we think.
You know, sometimes when I go to church and I contemplate, and I'm like, it breaks when I think of Christ like as a young man, right? It breaks my heart, to think of all the everything the torture that he went through, and his mission, it wasn't very long. I mean, it was like 18 months, something like that. He wasn't here very long, right? And then just the amount of just brutality, right? And it breaks my heart. And sometimes I have thought like it wasn't worth it. Like, thank you, Lord, but like I feel my heart breaks for you, like it wasn't worth it. Look what's happening. But then I feel like he would be like, but don't say that, because like you're here. You know what I mean? And look how many other people, and that's true too. But it's just like, I don't know, man. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like wrestling with God, but you have to know who's the God of this world. The God of this world is Satan, and a lot of people are serving him. And God gave him dominion on this world to fool us. And that's why it breaks his heart, because God doesn't want us to go to hell. We choose to go to hell
Oh,
by
100%.
disobeying him. And he gave dominion to the enemy to rule here. And he's ruling. Yes, God is ruling everything, but on the surface level that we see, because we're very small compared to God,
Right.
he's ruling. And a lot of people are serving the enemy. And it breaks God's heart. And remember, Jesus won because he defeated death.
Correct.
Even the enemy came to talk to Jesus and try to tell him, "Hey, you see these mountains over here? If you just follow me and abandon the Father, I can give it to you all."
Right. Every kingdom, every richness,
Everything. And Jesus
everything.
was like, "Well, I already own it. You just don't know. And I have something better, in the
Yeah.
heavenly kingdom." So I think the problem is a lot of these people are serving the enemy. They don't understand that there is consequences to your actions on this world and what you put in. And God knows what's in your heart. For example, you got people here in America that call themselves Christian, and they're for the genocide in Gaza. They're like, yeah, they're putting the satanic antichrist flag of modern Israel in the church and worshiping it and praying for these people. And I'm like, okay, in a way, you're praying for the enemy without knowing it because they're the enemy. But no, you're praying because you want to bless them. So I feel like America's getting destroyed because for the past 76, 77 years, America has been blessing the Antichrist. And they were full to blessing God's chosen people. So what dispensationalism did and Schofield Bible, they took the attention away from Jesus and put it on the Jews in Israel, on a pot of land that is going to be destroyed and has been destroyed many times, right? So I don't know where that will head, but they are crucifying Jesus every day in Palestine. Every child that is under the rubble is a declaration of crucifying Jesus Christ. Because we're the last remaining seed of Christ biologically, right? Spiritually, we're all the seed of Abraham because we're followers of Christ. But if you look at Palestinians, regardless if they're Muslim or Christian, and we had Palestinian Jews, by the way, before 1948, those are the people from Judea. These are the real Jews. These are the people that were in that land. These are the ones that are the Canaanites. And if you trace my DNA, I'm from there. But if you bring a Jew that lives in Israel today and does their DNA, they have no connection to the land. They're from everywhere but there. They're from Poland, Germany, Ukraine, Russia, Morocco, Yemen, anywhere but there. So, what I think that entity is doing, they're killing the seed of Christ, the biological seed of Christ. So the more they kill, the more they're crucifying Christ. The more children they kill, the more they're sacrificing to their god, Moloch, Baal. They've done that in the past. And if they build the third temple, well, guess what? God is going to destroy it again because he destroyed every temple they built. And I think we're in a place where it's going to be very hard to pick who is actually a follower of God as a Jew and who is a follower of Satan as a Jew, as a Zionist. We're going to come to a place where we're not going to be able to differentiate, because whoever's committing the genocide in Israel, they're Jews, right? Whoever run all these government, like industries, organizations here in America, they're Jews. They're not just Zionists, they're Jews. So we're going to have to understand, and I think Jews have to be the loudest about this, because if you don't tell us who's who, they're all going to get it. And that's what's going to happen, because history repeats itself, as you said. I don't wish death on anybody, but you will reap what you sow. And I don't want to see innocent people getting in this mess that are not supposed to be part of the problem. So, what do you think is going to be the solution for this Jewish problem?
I think it's going to take, like what you said, it's very important for people. I'll tell you, like in the Hispanic community, right? In the Latino community, many people who aren't, in our community don't understand how this all breaks down, right? So Latinos are from South and Central America, and Hispanics are from the Caribbean. There's a racial difference between us, that being of indigenous blood. Latinos have indigenous blood, Caribbeans do not. There's some Taino indigenous blood in Puerto Rico, but in Cuba, completely no. The Taino Indians were slaughtered. So this racial breakdown further goes into like a hierarchy, right? And so this hierarchy, the difference between like Latinos and Hispanics is great, because, for example, in our community, like for Cubans, we don't cover each other. We don't say, oh no, like maybe you've heard the term la raza, which is something Latinos, like especially Mexicans say a lot, like la raza, the race, everything's for the race. Cubans are very much like, don't give me that BS. If you screwed up, we'll take care of you ourselves. Like there's no covering for anyone at any time. So if you want to know, the biggest critics of Cubans is another Cuban. And that's how it should be. Everyone should clean their own house. When all of this stuff started coming out in the United States with drag queens giving kids shows and reading and all this and that, and groomers, there was an organization of gay people who came out very vocally, and they were all over social media, Gays Against Groomers, and they were like, this is not what we stand for. We do not stand for any of this. Children are to be protected, and we don't even understand why transvestites are part of the LGB. It used to be just us, and now they're coming along, and we don't understand what's going on, but we're not standing for it. And so they made a very clear separation between themselves. And I think that you're right. I think that it's important for the Jewish people to do the same thing, because there are so many little sects in there that people who are non-Jewish do not understand the difference. Like even before I had the conversation with the rabbi, like I didn't understand all of these differences either. To me, it was either you were Hasidic or you were hiding. That's it. That's what I would call it, Hasidic or hiding. And he basically broke it down like, no, those reformists who were basically like, you might as well just give up the religion. I don't even know what the point of that was. And then you have conservatism, and then you have Zionism, and these are all different things. And so I think it is important for Jewish Americans especially to stand up against whatever they see going on wrong, so that they aren't associated with something that has nothing to do with them. I'm sure that there are a ton of regular Jewish Americans who have no dual loyalty, who have been here for generations. They love the country, their grandparents or their parents, or they served in the military and they're in it, and they don't feel, they're not reformists, they're probably conservatives, but it doesn't represent them. Zionism doesn't represent them, and they speak out about it. I think it's called Huey News on Instagram. He does this all the time. He's Jewish, but he's like, what is this? And he speaks out about it. And I think that that's very important. And it's also very important, I think, for Americans to, I think it's easier for New Yorkers because we have to live with each other, right? So when I go to a city that's homogenous, I kind of feel freaked out because I'm like, where's everybody? Where's everybody? This is not what I'm used to. I'm used to seeing everybody that's different. It's the same to me. That is the normal situation for me, right? And so it's a lot easier, I think, as a New Yorker to say like, no, we need to stick together because New Yorkers do. We have to. It's tough and we are going to need each other at any moment. And we don't know when that moment's going to be. And we all understand this. Whether you're wealthy or not, everybody understands this. Whereas in other places, it's like you may never even see a Jewish person. You may not see, a Middle Eastern person, maybe one, maybe two, like that. So there's a lot of ignorance, but it would really help, right? If we could understand like everyone is not the same. It's not a blanket situation. It's not, wouldn't that be great if we could just blanket our problems away and just get, it's this cup. So just throw away the cup and we'll be fine. But sadly, it's not just that cup. And in this situation specifically, because historically they have had to convert to other religions, they are in other religions. You can't even say, I'll tell you, like when you said it's been decades that America has been under, Israeli occupation, is true. It happened with LBJ. I think LBJ was the president that opened the door, wide open to Zionists. And when I started doing the research, it's because he was Jewish. He was a reformist Jew. And a lot of people don't know this. They're like, no, he was raised in the Baptist church. I'm like, do a little more, just 5 more minutes, and you will see that he was actually from a lineage of reformist Jews. This is his lineage. And his aunt, who was a huge influence in his life, was a straight up Zionist. So this is where that came from. He opened the floodgates. He allowed this to happen. And once they were in here, once the Zionists were in here, they were entrenched and they started doing like their little blackmail operations and their spying and all this. Once they had enough people by the groin, then it was just like, from there it was just rinse and repeat until we get to where we are today. But yeah, definitely conversations and everything else. I wanted to bring this up. I was looking at my phone because I wanted to bring up this this verse that's very thought-provoking, right? And when we say the enemy, and I'm not saying that Satan doesn't exist. I know that there are dark forces, and I understand that. However, I'm just going to read this. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And that's Isaiah 45:7. There is nothing above God. Nothing.
Amen.
There's nothing. Even Satan is like a part of God. God is everything. There's nothing can exist outside of God. So even the darkest person, the most vile act is still part of God and the way that things are and the way that things have to be for a reason that we may not 100% know. A couple of weeks ago, the priest was talking about purgatory. That was like the sermon, and he was talking about purgatory. And at the end, I was like, wait, we are in purgatory. He just described us. Like, you have to do your best, and hopefully you'll get, you won't go down. Hopefully you'll go up, and you do your best, and you try to, rack up these good, not just deeds, but deeds in your heart. How you feel about another person, wishing another person well, even in your mind, in your heart, like, God, please bless this person, listen to their needs, Lord, they need you, please help them, create a miracle in their life today. That is where we're at. Think about it. Things are not 100% bad. They can get bad, but not 100% of the time. And it's not 100% good either. It's like great moments of, and then it goes, you know what I mean? And like, wait, we're the ones in purgatory here, sir, is what you're telling me, And if you think about it that way, then it's like everything's a test. If you think about it that way, then this is your opportunity. You're feeling this way about this group of people, and God in his just awesome. And like, it's just mind blowing to me because when I met the rabbi, it was at a time when I was like full on, like, I can't take this, not another minute. Like, I cannot stand this. This is a cancer. How can people not see this? This is evil, blah, 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 blah. And then I met the rabbi. And let me tell you something. He may have a million faults and nobody's perfect, but this man radiated kindness. This man looked dead in my face, right into my eyes when he spoke to me. The amount of, it was palpable. It was palpable, you know. And when he left the studio, I was like, do you guys feel this? And everybody was just like, because he himself as an individual carried that light. He does. He does. There's just no denying it. No matter what you think or anything, once you meet him as a person, as a man, it makes you understand certain things. And I thanked God and I said, thank you, Lord, for coming in and like speaking to me and showing me something. Everyone is not the same. And it's important for us to keep that in mind now more than ever, because the more we say everybody's the same, the less we're going to be able to really pinpoint those who are responsible for the atrocities that are taking place.
Yeah, I mean, God doesn't see black, white, this, that. God sees sheep and lost sheep. And our job as followers of the way, which is Christ, is to try to lead the lost sheep to the right shepherd as followers of the shepherd. So, yeah, I believe that as sheep and lost sheep, and there's a lot of lost sheep, a lot of lost sheep. You know, I was a lost sheep before, and now I'm found. Hallelujah to that.
Amen.
Well, Nadia, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Would you tell the audience where they can find you?
Yes, you guys can find me on YouTube, Nadia4Real. That's Nadia number 4 Real on YouTube, and also across social media.
All right, sounds good. Well, I know we're going to probably do this again
Yes,
because
that'd be great.
we could just keep going on, and I think we have a lot of things in common and our minds think kind of the same. So we'll definitely bring you back on, and I can't wait to be on yours as well.
100%. I can't wait for that either. This has been a great opportunity. Thank you guys so much for having me on, and really from my heart, it was a great experience. Thank you.
Nadia, muchas gracias.
Igualmente.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao.
All right, guys, you heard it from Nadia. Well, what an amazing person, man. We have so many things in common. That's crazy. This is the first time I actually get to talk to her like that. So check her out. Watch her YouTube videos. She has really good videos. Until then, God bless you and free Palestine.